Hello. Today I will be once more featuring the Tier 6 Italian premium cruiser, the Duca d'Aosta. I already considered the ship to be quite strong and played the way I recommended. I thought it was a lot of fun and very effective at what it did. But apparently a lot of other people had issues with the ship, and they didn't really feel comfortable in it. So Wargaming buffed the ship a fair amount, and this is basically the second iteration of this ship, with slightly buffed Duca, we might call it. It still plays very much the same. It hasn't changed the playstyle of it at all. I still enjoy pushing in with my DDs, trying to ambush the enemy DDs, and honestly getting into brawling range as soon as possible. I still consider that the absolute strength of this ship. Since there's no point going over all the things I've already covered, which is of course the great shell velocity, the great ship speed, and so forth, I should instead focus more on the buffs. One of the most obvious buff you might notice is that I actually have both consumables. I have both hydroacoustic surge and defensive AA. Now this is probably the biggest and most clear-cut buff that this ship has gotten. They haven't touched the anti-air values at all, which means even with defensive AA, you won't be shooting down any planes. Well, I mean, you'll shoot down some planes with defensive AA active, but if you're hoping to replace a Cleveland or pretty much any sort of anti-air ship, you're not going to have any luck. This is mostly for self-defense, and well, considering you can get around, without speccing FT, just using the AA range mod like I do, you can get 4.8 km range on it. It's pretty useful for helping your DD buddies out, considering you're pushing in with your DDs a lot of the time and they don't necessarily have anti-air. So your ability to help them out with defensive AA and split up the torps is of course a welcome change. But it doesn't have any real impact on the way I play this ship, because I still run the Hydro to push into the caps. The only thing defensive AA really gives us is more security against carriers. In the past, this ship had a pretty big weakness when you pushed into the caps first, and if you ran into the enemy planes, if they focused you, you were pretty helpless. Now you actually have some way of defending yourself, some way of keeping yourself alive, while still being able to maintain that old aggressive playstyle. So it's more of a comfort change than anything. Carriers aren't going to be really that affected by this change because the anti-air values, as I said, are pretty low. So it's not like they're going to be losing planes to running into your anti-air. They'll just go, oh, there's a Duca, let's back off. That's pretty much it. Unlikely to lose any real planes to it because of the low DPS values on the anti-air. So it's a pretty nice change. Shooting the Graf Spee, of course the long range AP, overpenning, and pretty inconsistent, switching to HE. Now if you watch my IFHE guide, you will know that since the Duca also has 152mm guns, just like the Cleveland, this ship obviously benefits greatly from running IFHE. In fact, well, if I could actually land some shells on this guy, you can see that I'm pretty consistently just getting full penetrations, aka just dealing consistent HE damage, which is of course the goal of running IFHE. The shells that land on the deck are shattered, or it might not his hull, but the superstructure hits are finally registering and dealing consistent damage. Now moving on, another change to the ship has been the increase in rudder shift, or well, decrease in rudder shift, since they're buffing it. It's something around 1 to 2 seconds that they buffed it. It's not that big of a deal once again. It doesn't really impact the way you play it, but ultimately it just makes it better at what you do. Since you want to push into brawling range, you're going to be fighting a lot of DDs, you want to be dodging a lot of torpedoes and so forth. The ability to dodge and maneuver your ship around easier is of course very welcome. And it's another one of those quality of life buffs for this ship. Doesn't really have a big impact on how it plays, it just makes it slightly better at what it already was pretty good at, in my opinion. Of course you can play it as a long range HE spammer if you want and use the rudder shift as an advantage there as well, but once again, because of the lack of any real DPM, you're not a Cleveland, you're not a Pudioni, you're not going to be dealing high long range HE damage with high fire damage because you simply lack the guns for it. You only have 8 guns, so that's unlikely to happen. Now, it still retains the same great advantages. I mean, those are of course the disadvantage, lack of anti-air, lack of DPM and so forth, but it still retains the same advantages, which is of course railgun-like guns, especially at close range, and the great concealment. 10.3 km concealment with Concealment Expert is fantastic for a tier 6 cruiser, and it really allows you to catch a lot of DDs off guard because, well, they expect you to be spotted when you sneak in, so you often manage to surprise them. Let's see, this game so far seems extremely close. And, well, a spotter plane, not really that important. Mostly I use it to see things on the other sides of islands, or if I'm low HP or someone is sailing away from me, like a carrier is fleeing from me, I might pop the spotter plane to get that increase in range. But ultimately you don't really use it too much. It's extremely situational. You cannot get a fighter plane, which is something I would probably prefer to have, but you cannot slot it, so that's okay. Here we can of course see the effects of IFHE on this New Mexico. He is giving broadside though, so in this case I switched to AP. The AP is pretty prone to shattering or breaking if they angle, but if you do get broadsides you can deal pretty okay damage with it. Against cruisers it's highly effective against broadsides of course, but even if they angle, they can negate a lot of the damage. Another thing of course worth mentioning is the change to the torpedoes. In the past you had very fast but very short range torps. You had I think 66 knot torps that had 4.5 km range, exceptionally well suited for brawling. These have been changed. The damage values are still the same, which are pretty damn low. I think they deal like 12 or 13k per torp, so the damage values are pretty damn low. But they have changed them so that the concealment is only 1 km, meaning they are some of the stealthiest torps in the game, and they also have 12 km of range. And this is of course pretty important since you can reach a concealment of 10.3 km with Concealment Expert and Camo. It means that this cruiser is able to stealth torp with a pretty comfortable margin. But considering you only have 3 torps per side and the cooldown on these torps is almost 70 seconds, or actually I think it's exactly 70 seconds. The only reason why it showed less there is because I of course run Adrenaline Rush, since it's very useful on a ship like this. So the buff is more of adding additional flavor to it. It's not really that big of a deal. In case you're wondering why I'm sailing, giving broadside to these 2 battleships, they are capping our base. No one else on my team reacted at all, as usual. So I am hauling ass to get back to the cap as soon as possible to bail my team out. And that would have been a double strike, and of course Kraken unlocked as well. But since this is a test account, I don't get anything like high caliber Confederate Kraken. All the things that I would probably have in this game so far. This ship reminds me a lot of a DD. It's kind of like an oversized DD, much more so than people often say, like play the Atlanta like an oversized DD or something similar. This ship actually feels much more like it than the Atlanta ever did. You can see the great speed. It has 36.4. This is without speed flag, and thanks to this insane speed I'm able to make it into the cap just before the T-22 finishes capping. My team is only now reacting to the fact, and I get spot on him and I'm able to reset the cap as well. So our team is saved and we will not be losing this game, which is of course nice, and equally depressing that no one else on the team reacted at all. But as I've said in the past, when you play random battles, expect to have to do everything yourself. Rely as little as possible on your teammates. Only really rely on your own performance, your own actions, and yeah, that's pretty much the goal. You will rarely, if you only rely on yourself, you rarely get disappointed, and it's really the best way to improve at the game as well. Just focus on doing everything for the team to win and doing all the work. That way you will have a more pleasant experience, because if you count on the randoms on your team or your teammates to do anything, they will most likely let you down. T-22 actually ambushes me. He pretty smartly moved in the smoke to a different position and he is rushing me, but I'm turning in and slowing down, and here the increased rudder shift, perhaps instead of eating 2 torps I only eat 1, so there is a possibility that I might have eaten 2 torps if it wasn't for the better rudder shift, and if it wasn't for the buff, I might have actually died there. So the buffs have made the ship better at what it already does, but they have not changed the fundamental playstyle or the gameplay of the ship at all. And that's something I like, because I like the playstyle of the ship. I like the way it plays. It plays very differently from really any other cruiser. And I still think the Duca is one of the more fun premiums in the game, and I still recommend it. Of course, the issues are still there that any T6 premium shares, which is of course the issues with matchmaking. I do feel it has gotten a lot better as of late. You're not as consistently matched up against tier 8s as in the past, but it's still a very real issue that when you play T6 you will end up quite often on the lower tiers. But it's not nearly as consistent as it used to be, so it has improved. And that's pretty much it. If you get same tier matchmaking, or even you happen to be top tier, then the ship is really strong, really enjoyable, and one of my recommended premiums, absolutely. If you want a new Italian captain trainer for upcoming Italian ships, then this is once again a pretty nice recommendation. The game ends, I think we kept their base or something, made 464k credits, which is pretty nice considering it's a tier 6 premium. Only 81k damage, but then again, you shouldn't be playing the Duca with the goal of getting some sick average damages, because you want to be hunting and shooting a lot of DDs in this ship. Getting high damage is a bit of a rarity, in fact, in this ship. Looking at the team score, 1.7k base XP. It's standard battles, you don't really get that much. Considering I saved our base, I would have loved to gotten some more. In fact, if we look at the detailed report, you can see defense points, 152 out of 152. In fact, I got all our capture defense points and 6 kills as well, but that's the way standard battles work, and that's of course another one of the reasons why I don't really like standard battles. But the ship is still great, just better at everything it does. And since it's unlikely that they will be changing the ship even further, at least I think it's unlikely. I don't know if other CCs or super testers are still having issues with it and they're gonna buff it even more. But since I am suspecting that this ship is finally reaching the point where they want it to be, I'm gonna be giving my recommended build on the ship as well. Starting off, we got modules. Nothing you can upgrade on the ship, which it was pretty okay. Priority-wise, consumables, you want repair and hydro first. Defensive AA if you can afford it. Spotting aircraft if you can afford it. They are not as important. Main armaments mod 1 and AA guns mod 2. I mentioned the reasons: protect yourself, protect your DD teammates, or well, any teammates from carrier strikes by being able to pop defensive AA. The actual DPS values, as you can see, are pretty garbage, but it's more about the fact that you're spreading out the bombs and tars by using the consumable. Damage control system 1, once again, because I never really had any issues with losing steering or engine, like other people apparently have had. Steering gears mod 2 for that improved rudder shift. Moving on to captain perks, priority target, pretty much must have on all cruises. Adrenaline rush, because the default turret traverse is already so good, so I prefer getting this one first. And demolition expert, we want that fire starting capability, especially once we spec into IFHE, which will nerf it. Concealment expert, so we get that awesome 10.3 km concealment. And finally, as soon as we get a 14-point captain, we get IFHE to make the HE significantly more consistent and to be able to deal better long-range damage. As you can see, with the expert marksman, our turret traverse is 23.4 seconds, so this doesn't really add more than a couple seconds to it. It's already quite good, but there's not really much else I can think of using or getting for this one. Torpedo acceleration is an option, but the torps are already so have such a long cooldown that very questionable. Tier 3 perks, I honestly think, I mean, vigilance you don't need because you always have Hydra, you have double consumables, so you will always have it. Superintendent, you will rarely live long enough to be able to actually use any of the stuff. Basic firing training, your AA is garbage, buffing garbage is kind of pointless. Torpedo armament, once again, the torps really aren't that special. So I think it's highly likely I will be using the last 3 points on this ship for survivability expert, which is something I usually don't recommend on cruisers at all, but I guess it really highlights how differently this ship plays from any other cruiser, and my points of how it plays more like a DD than any other cruiser. The fact that I really probably intend to spec into survivability expert on it is pretty telling. So this is going to be a bit of a different captain, but I don't mind. I like having new, unique ships in the game, and Duca is definitely one, and one that I will recommend. Anyway, that was all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed it.